One thing that Ethan did a couple of years ago, and he said, I'm going to thank you for this. He said, I'm going to set up an office of Lindersmith in New Mexico. And he set that office up, and Catherine Hoffman is who he sent. I would like to give Catherine a smile. Dee is with me, my wife, and been with me through this whole process. We worked so hard the first term when this issue first broke that I wanted to really discuss the failed war on drugs, and that legalization needed to be a part of that discussion. Dee said, "You did what? And why did you do it?" And she knew why I did it. That was not an issue, but that we had worked so hard, and I believe put ourselves in a position to be able to talk about it. And Dee's been there this whole way. I also want to tell you about my son. My son, we have a son and a daughter. My son just finished up his freshman year at Denver University, and I've got to tell you this. My daughter graduated from the University of Colorado at Boulder, and she graduated as valedictorian, as in the outstanding student for arts and science. Out of 2,600 students, our daughter graduated as #1 student. And I'm telling you this because maybe you'll think there's some brains here by association. That's what I'm hoping. And I appreciate everybody asking, what are you going to do after you're through being governor? Well, I intend to pursue my athletics. Hope to continue to do well in the triathlon. I'm going to ski my winters, and I'm going to climb Mount Everest. So 2 years from today, I intend to get really high on that mountain. And talk about the American dream. For those of you that don't know, Dee and I really started a business back in 1976. I started it even a couple of years before that as a one-person handyman operation. And over a 20-year period, actually grew that to over 1,000 people, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, pipe fitting. It was the American dream come true. Show up on time, do what you say you're going to do for people, do a little bit more than what you say you're going to do for people, and you can succeed. And I'm living proof of that. And we actually sold our business a couple of years ago. So barring a revolution, we don't have to work when we're out of this. And I don't know exactly what that means, but again, it's what this country is all about. Work hard, keep your word, and you can make a difference. And my entire life, I'd always hoped to run for political office. I've always believed that politics was a high calling. And by that, you get elected, you have a chance to do good by people. I've been given that chance, and I recognize that 50,000 people would line up outside right now to tell you that I have been nothing but a scourge on New Mexico. I understand that. But I have been given the opportunity to do good by people, and in my heart, that's all that I have been engaged in, is doing that. I will also let you know that I've never been involved in politics before. This is my first political office. I got re-elected, but I went to the Republican Party 2 weeks before I was going to announce my candidacy for governor. They said, we like you, we like what you've got to say, but you need to know that you will never get elected. It's not possible. It's not possible to come from completely outside the political system and get elected. What I did is actually paid for the election myself. Something I wanted to do, something that and by that I mean I jump-started my own campaign. Nobody was going to contribute to somebody who hadn't been involved in politics before, but the idea in my mind was, if I paid for this, I wasn't going to be in debt to anybody, and I could do what I thought was right. And so, if you vote for somebody like that, if you're going to vote for somebody who's never been involved in politics before, business person promising to bring a common sense business approach to state government, never been involved in politics, promising to put the issues that should be on the front burner, why would you vote for somebody like that? Why? Well, I think you'd vote for somebody like that because maybe they'd actually do what they say they were going to do. Maybe. And if you think about that a little bit, this guy's going to piss everybody off before he's done. And in that regard, I've been completely successful as a governor of New Mexico. I happen to believe that this country is founded on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I've dedicated my governorship to making sure that there's a level playing field, that there's equal access to that American dream. I believe in limited government. I believe in lower taxes. I believe in an eye for an eye. You do harm to somebody, whether that's violent crime or whether that's property crime, I think that you should be punished. I believe in individual property rights. I believe in the right to bear arms. I believe in a woman's right to choose. I believe in individual accountability and responsibility. I believe in the Constitution of the United States of America. I believe that if you work hard, that if you're honest, you'll get ahead. You don't get ahead at the expense or hardship of others, nor do others get ahead at your expense or hardship. I believe I've made a difference in New Mexico, a really positive difference. I've taken a leading stand on school choice. I think it's the ultimate discrimination when poor parents can't choose to live in the best neighborhoods, that they end up living in the worst neighborhoods with the worst schools, and their kids are trapped in situations that they end up not being able to get out of. I believe in school choice, giving every single student in the state of New Mexico, and this country, for example, over a long period of time, the ability to choose a school, just like higher education. Highways in New Mexico. You know, we received an award in New Mexico, and as a contractor I should get this, but we received an award in New Mexico that is a ratio of federal dollars spent, more of those federal dollars went into asphalt and concrete than any other state in the United States. That's what you're supposed to do when it comes to highways, right? Taxes, I believe in lower taxes. We haven't raised a tax, at least, since I have been governor of New Mexico. We reformed Medicaid in the state of New Mexico. I'm going to argue that we're delivering better health care to those in need of health care in New Mexico. I believe in limited government. We have fewer state employees today than when I took office. I think we're doing a better job. We're doing more work. I want to argue that we're more efficient because we're doing it with fewer people. And we had a prison problem in the state of New Mexico that was not getting addressed. Huge issue. The courts were running our prisons in New Mexico. We actually addressed that issue and we solved that issue. I've vetoed 700 bills since I've been in office. That is something that it doesn't put me in great favor with legislators, but in vetoing those 700 bills, I always took into account life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And each law that gets passed, you know what, that's a little piece of your freedom that goes along with those laws. And I tried to really take a judicious look at all those laws. I vetoed hate crime laws. You want to give the government the ability to decide that you're going to be prosecuted on the basis of thought? I just think this is incredibly scary. That's my own opinion. I vetoed motorcycle helmet laws. You know what? I ride a motorcycle. I wear protective clothing from tip to toe. But we do need organ donors. And the fact that people would want to ride their motorcycle without helmets, that's their choice. I wish we could have a law to go along with that, though, that if they ended up as a vegetable on the state dime, that somehow they could have had an insurance policy that would have covered them. You know, I vetoed cigarette taxes. I vetoed taxes of all kinds. I'm not for smoking cigarettes, but I vetoed all sorts of bills that would have limited your ways in which you had to buy cigarettes, making it more difficult to buy. Again, I'm not for cigarettes, but is that really the solution? I vetoed the dog and a cat exercise bill. You have to exercise your dogs and cats if you're a pet shop an hour every single day. Well, I think that's a great idea, but does the government really want, do I really want to sign that bill? Because ultimately we're going to have to establish the dog and cat exercise police to go out and see whether or not I vetoed helmets for pole vaulters. I vetoed countless spending bills. You can't spend money if you don't have any money. I've vetoed bills that benefit a few and not all. I have a philosophy that long-term, young men need to be responsible for their children born out of wedlock. I think that that's something that we're going to see. I have a prediction of a whole slew of new laws, all right? Whole slew of new laws that we're going to see. And you know, those laws are going to be what we eat. They're coming. They're coming. Eating meat, I think that's one that's coming up. Eating at McDonald's, you know, fat content. We're already seeing that. Fat content in the French fries. We're going to see it. Cokes and sodas in schools. Our senator, one of our senators here from New Mexico, actually, federal legislation limiting the sale of Coca-Cola in the schools. I don't know, I'm not going to do that, but that's what's happening. Bull riding, I'm telling you, they are going to outlaw bull riding. If you've ever been to bull riding, man, that is a train wreck every second. And they're going to outlaw it. It's dangerous, it's incredibly dangerous. Bungee jumping. They're going to pass legislation that's going to require everybody to exercise. And they're going to do this. You're going to have to exercise a certain amount every day. Again, I don't know how this is going to fit in with the enforcement of this, but you know, we'll find that out. Rock climbing without a rope. I can't believe that they haven't gotten to that one yet. Here's another one. Helmets while driving a car. I mean, it's going to save lives. I mean, if everybody had to wear a helmet on top of their seatbelts and the airbags, I mean, my God, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. You know, issues in this country in the past that have really defied logic. Witch burning. How did that ever allow? Now, I realize we weren't a country at that time, but maybe that's why we became a country, because of something like witch burning. But then after we became a country, women not voting? How was that ever allowed to occur? How was alcohol prohibition ever allowed to occur? How was slavery ever allowed to occur in this country? And then even after we abolished slavery, how was segregation ever allowed to continue in this country? How did that ever happen? And in this last century, segregation and alcohol prohibition were with us. And this is coming from Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh listed the 10 worst laws of the last century. And according to Rush Limbaugh, the worst law of the last century was the prohibition of alcohol. He put that as being worse than segregation. So, given that as an experience, how come we haven't connected the dots when it comes to the war on drugs? And that's what we have with us today. We have with us today another one of these atrocities. It is truly an atrocity, and we're going to look back on this period of time and recognize it as the atrocity that it is. The war on drugs is a miserable failure. Governor, why is it that you're talking about this issue when there are so many other important issues to be talked about? Why are you talking about this issue? You know what, there is not a bigger issue in this country that is going unaddressed. When you consider, and I'm governor of the state of New Mexico, when you consider that 50% of what we're spending on law enforcement, 50% of what we're spending on the courts, and 50% of what we're spending on the prisons is going to the war on drugs, again, when we have all the needs that we have out there, is there a bigger issue in the country facing us today that is not going addressed? No, there is not. And of course, you're sending the wrong message, Governor. You ought to be ashamed. Let me give you my message when it comes to drugs, all right? And this is the message I have with regard to drugs, is don't do drugs. And I also got a message when it comes to alcohol, too, and that's don't do alcohol. You're looking at somebody who hasn't had a drink of alcohol in 13 years, and I got to tell you, if you quit drinking, you'll probably join me. It's the best decision that I ever made in my entire life. And until you stop drinking, you understand what a handicap that it is. And for any of you that smokes cigarettes, there is absolutely nothing redeeming whatsoever about cigarettes. I don't have an explanation for why anybody would choose to smoke. But that is a decision that you have to make. That is a decision that you have to make. I'd like to tell you my own experience, which is don't do them. I got enough handicaps, and I am somebody who's one of these naturally high individuals. I happen to have smoked marijuana, I happen to have tried drugs, I happen to have drank, I even smoked cigarettes at one time in my life. And I realize now in my life that you can be high, that amounts to exercise, that amounts to keeping your brain moving, and a lot of things that go into that. But I'm not like anybody else. I mean, we're all looking for a heightened sense of reality. Anybody sending a positive message in this country when it comes to drugs? Anybody? Teachers, politicians, anyone? No one is sending a positive message when it comes to drugs, and yet 80 million Americans have done illegal drugs. 54% of the graduating class of the year 2000 will have done illegal drugs. What about kids, Governor? Wrong message. Shame on you when it comes to kids. Here's my message for kids. Kids, I love my kids. I love my kids. So I would hope that when it comes to kids, the message to kids is that we love them, that we tell them the truth about pot, we tell them the truth about LSD, we tell them the truth about LSD. We tell them the truth about heroin. And for parents that want to stick their heads in the sand and recognize that some of our kids don't do heroin, it happens. And, you know, more than anything, of course, you're afraid that your kids are going to do any of these substances and get in an automobile. My instructions to my kids, don't do any of this stuff, right? But if you get in a situation, you're going to get in the car, you get in a situation, you know, you're not comfortable with, call me up. I'm coming to get you, no questions asked, because I love you, first and foremost. Talking about drugs, death is going to skyrocket, Governor, from overdose. And the blood of those overdose victims are on your hands. Well, I was shocked to find out. Shocked to find out. And this is coming from the anti-tobacco folks, that 450,000 people die every year from tobacco. I think that's kind of an inflated number. Whether it's 450,000 or 200,000 or 250, that's a lot of people. 150,000 people die every year from their use of alcohol. I don't think that surprises anybody, and I'm not talking about drinking and driving now, I'm just talking about the consequence of doing alcohol. They estimate 150,000 people die every year. 100,000 people die every year as a consequence of legal prescription drugs. I was shocked to find out, and I ask people all the time, how many people died from cocaine and heroin? Well, when they find out that only 10,000 people died from that, I think they're kind of taken aback. And of course, you know, marijuana doesn't even make the list. And the response is, well, it's because of our policies, Governor. It's illegal. These are illegal substances. These are against the law. Wake up, Governor. That's why there's so few deaths. Well, baloney. Baloney. Overdose is a function of prohibition. If we can control these substances, we can arguably bring that number down. Wake up, America. Cigarettes are killing us. Alcohol's killing us. Legal prescription drugs, if not taken properly, are killing us. Yes, there are some that are dying from heroin and cocaine, but we could improve on that situation. And wake up, America. Marijuana isn't even making the list. Although I'm sure that a few people have smoked themselves to death. And yet, wake up, America. Which one of these substances gets you arrested? And how many people are we arresting every year? We're arresting 1.6 million people a year. That is like the equivalent of the population of the state of New Mexico every single year. 800,000 of those arrests are marijuana. Out of those 800,000 marijuana arrests, 400,000 of those arrests are Hispanic. Tell me that half the users of marijuana in this country are Hispanic, and that falls very disproportionately on New Mexico, which has the highest percentage of Hispanics of any state in the United States. And blacks, and we've heard about it during this conference. I mean, if you are arrested as a black, it's seven times that you're more likely to actually spend time behind bars. So what do we need to do? Well, what we need to do is, first of all, we need to legalize marijuana. We need to adopt harm reduction strategies for all these other drugs. We need to move away from a criminal model to a medical model. And when I say legal, I'm saying it's never going to be legal to sell drugs to kids. It's never going to be legal for kids to do drugs. It's never going to be legal to do drugs and do harm, just like alcohol. You know what? You have a drink at a bar, that's acceptable behavior. You have a number of drinks at the bar and you get intoxicated, That's acceptable behavior. But then you go and get in your car, that's not acceptable behavior. That's criminal behavior. You get in a car and you put someone in harm's way. We need to apply those same principles when it comes to drugs. Guess you're just going to toss in the towel, Johnson. You're just a quitter. Drug use has been cut in half, and you want to give up the fight. Drug use has been cut in half. Come on, they're talking about drug use. The 12 million Americans over the last 20 years have stopped using drugs. We've arrested 20 million over that same amount of time. You know, come on, that is absolutely crazy. At a minimum, we've got to stop getting tougher on drugs. We have to eliminate mandatory sentencing. Wake up, America, wake up! We're letting violent felons out of jail to make room for non-violent, drug-convicted individuals that need to go to prison because of mandatory sentencing. Get tough for doing drugs and doing harm. Get tough. Marijuana is a gateway drug, Governor. Legalizing it is going to only lead people to using harder drugs. Look, marijuana be opposed to the legalization of marijuana, but not on the basis of marijuana being a gateway drug. I mean, as flippant as it is, that is like saying milk is a gateway drug to alcohol. Statistically, 1 out of 105 1 out of 105 marijuana users go on to use cocaine on a regular basis. I say you legalize marijuana and you truly do away with the gateway aspect, because people, the guy that sells you marijuana now also has other things in his bag. Legalize marijuana, control it, regulate it, tax it, and you're going to do away with a huge gateway aspect when it comes to marijuana. That's like saying beer is going to lead to Everclear. No, and it's the same with drugs. I mean, crack cocaine came and it went. There was a recognition that there's a danger to this. Not that it's still not around, and that not that people still aren't going to drink themselves to death. I mean, during Prohibition, people drank themselves to death. People got blind, bathtub gin, wood alcohol. I mean, it's not going to go away if we legalize these substances, that people still aren't going to kill themselves on these substances. That is not going to go away. You're brain dead, Governor. You're absolutely brain dead if you think that legalizing marijuana and these harm reduction strategies for all these other drugs isn't going to lead to increased use. That is an absolute fundamental flaw in what we're doing in this country today. We are measuring our success on the basis of use. And just for a second here, all right? If tomorrow morning in the Albuquerque Journal, when you get up, and it says alcohol use up in the United States 3% over the last year, what would you think? Who cares? Alcohol use we recognize is cyclical, it's up and it's down, but what we care about is DWI up or down? Is domestic violence associated with alcohol? Is that up or down? Is property crime, violent crime associated with alcohol? Is that up or down? Why can't we apply that same criteria to drug use, to marijuana use? How many people believe that well, I ask this question all the time. How many people believe that you should go to jail for smoking pot, confines of your own home, doing no harm to anybody other than yourself? You know what? Nobody really raises their hand on that anymore, ever, anywhere. But then I ask the same group, how many people believe you should go to jail for selling pot? A few more hands go up. Selling a lot of pot, a lot more hands go up. I think there is a real hypocrisy here. Why are users any less guilty than the sellers? And there is an hypocrisy here, and if the sellers wouldn't exist if it weren't for users. So in a way, I think that there's a whole myth surrounding the idea of pusher. That in all these transactions, it's always sellers seeking out buyers. I asked the question, how many believe that as a expectant mother using cocaine or crack cocaine, that when your baby is born, how many of you believe that that baby should be taken away at birth? A lot of hands go up at that. Did you see the American Medical Association study about 8 weeks back that said that the crack baby is a myth? Now, they're not condoning cocaine. Don't do cocaine, don't do crack cocaine. But what the American Medical Association said was that cocaine use by an expectant mother was no worse than if that expectant mother were using tobacco or alcohol. And yet, which one of these substances gets your baby taken away at birth? It's cocaine. And I saw in the paper last week where a mother bore a child that was born dead, and she was a heavy crack cocaine user, and she was sentenced to 25 years in jail. Well, we're not condoning cocaine use here at all. That's terrible. But do we send mothers to jail for 25 years that their kids are born dead because they happen to have smoked tobacco or drank a whole lot of alcohol? No, we don't. So we really have an incredible double standard going on. And then I talk about student loans with people. How many of you think you should have your student loan taken away from you if you're convicted on drug-related crime, even if it's paraphernalia? A lot of hands go up. Well, you know, that's okay. I mean, it's the law, and if that's the law, why, maybe you should get your student loan taken away. Would it make any difference, I asked those same people, would it make any difference if you found out that students who committed rape and murder or armed robbery or burglary still get their student loans? Yeah, it makes a really big difference. Legalize marijuana, and I believe that there will be overall less substance abuse. And so, Governor, I guess you want to make it. I was just on the radio the other day, Portland, Oregon. So, Governor, I guess you want to make the United States like Holland, with their skyrocketing crime rates and their skyrocketing drug use. That's what people believe. They believe that. Surprise! Wake up! Holland's experience. 60% of the drug use is that in the United States. That's marijuana and hard drugs, and that's kids and adults. They got 25% the crime rate, 10% the homicide rate, 10% the incarceration rate. Holland's experience would not suggest that there wasn't a better way. And when I talk about harm reduction, Switzerland, you know, with their heroin maintenance program. I talked to the chief of police from Zurich, Switzerland. He said, we could not, as law enforcement, be more opposed to what was going to happen in Switzerland, which was free heroin. You got to get a prescription from a doctor. You go into a clinic to take your fix. But the idea was that death, disease, and crime was going to decrease. We couldn't have been more opposed because we thought that death, disease, and crime was going to increase. Well, he said, I'm here today to tell you that Zurich, Switzerland, is a much better place, that the results have exceeded anyone's wildest expectations. And look, you hear this all the time. You hear this all the time. It's the law. It's the law, and you want to not obey the law. I guess murder's okay. No, come on. Murder is doing harm to somebody else, all right? This is like the seatbelt law we have in this country today. We have a seatbelt law here in New Mexico. 94% of the people in New Mexico comply with the seatbelt law. It's a great law. It saves lives. But to what extent would we go in New Mexico or another state if only 50% of the people complied with it? First, it's not criminal to start with. Would we make it criminal? Maybe. And then at what point would we change the law, though? When 50% of what we were spending on law enforcement, the courts, and prisons were to get people to buckle up when they drove? At what point would we change the law? When the person who gets pulled over for not having buckled up their seatbelt for the third time, now we're into federal mandatory sentencing for not buckling up. At what point would we change the law? When the person who got pulled over shot the police officer because they didn't want to go to jail for 15 or 20 years? I would hope at that point that we would change the law. Overdose in northern New Mexico. Overdose in northern New Mexico statistically is about the worst in the country. And Governor, you're talking about heroin maintenance. Oh look, we had a bust in northern New Mexico. 28 people arrested for their distribution of heroin. Our prediction was was that overdose was going to skyrocket that weekend. And it did, because of course none of the heroin addicts went without heroin. It was just a new supply, different source, different quantity. Overdose skyrocket. Kids living in squalor, you know, you want to legalize drugs and you got kids living in squalor. Look, prohibition always makes the situation worse. Marijuana sells for more than gold today. Kids doing drugs, kids carrying drugs, that's all a function of prohibition. We become numb. Drug debt gone bad. How many drug debts gone bad do we have to read about that are played out with guns rather than in the courts? How many drug overdoses do we have to read about? How many of us right now are being victimized by someone who is burglarizing our home in the name of how am I going to pay for this $300 an ounce marijuana or subsequent drug that costs so much? Drug prohibition is what is tearing this country apart, not the actual use of drugs. Everything is made worse with prohibition. Our legislative strategy this legislative session, we had 8 bills up before the legislature. My promise to the citizens of New Mexico, you sign off on all these bills, the legislature passes all these bills, I promise, and again, small step, I promise that death, disease, and crime will decrease in New Mexico. I promise that more money will be spent on education and that more money, more resources will be put into treatment. We passed needle exchange in the state of New Mexico. We did pass an anti-overdose limiting the liability of law enforcement administering anti-overdose drugs, and we also allowed for the exchange, or the actual purchase of needles in pharmacies. All of these, again, are going to reduce death, they're going to reduce disease in a very small way. They're going to reduce crime. Whether you agree or disagree with anything I've said here today, I'm going to end this as I end most of what I ever talk about. It's Johnson's 7 principles of good government. You've heard them before, but here we go. Number 1 is become reality-driven. Find out what's what and base your decisions and actions on that. Number 2, always be honest and tell the truth. It's extremely difficult to do any damage to somebody who's willing to tell the truth, regardless of the consequences. Number 3, always do what's right and fair. Remember, the more you accomplish, the louder your critics will become. Learn to ignore your critics and continue to do what you think is right. Number 4, determine your goal, develop a plan to reach that goal, and then act. Don't procrastinate. Number 5, make sure everybody who ought to know what you're doing knows what you're doing. Communicate. Number 6, don't hesitate to deliver bad news. There's always time to fix things. Henry Kissinger said, anything that can be revealed eventually should be revealed immediately. Always time to fix things. And then lastly, be willing to do whatever it takes to get your job done. If you don't have a job that you love enough to do what it takes to get your job done, then quit. And tomorrow, get a job that you do love. And I want to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for attending this conference. And I want to thank each and every one of you for your activism on what is the biggest civil rights issue in this country today, in this world today, and it's the biggest issue that will have the longest positive impact on the world. And I thank each and every one of you for being a part of it.